First thing, man, just give us your story, like how'd you start off doing the whole Find the Others YouTube? And yeah, anything else you want to tell us about your journey with that? And yeah, we can get the ball rolling.
Cool, totally. Well, yeah, so I'm still pretty new at all of it. I started my YouTube channel about 8 months ago, and I guess you could say the very beginning was actually around 2 years ago, where I did like a one-off YouTube interview, and that was kind of the very beginning of my channel, which basically came from like, I'm a musician and I'm also a psychonaut and into both of those worlds. And so where those two subjects kind of intersect is where I'm most interested in, like
Mhm.
music and creativity and psychedelics and like how all of that can combine to create what, is a mind-blowing experience when you're like listening to the music, or it might create some kind of like change in your trip, like the music
Oh
can
yeah.
be this one of the most profound elements. So I'm always really interested in that. And I have some really good, musician friends that have blown my mind musically, and they're like in the psychedelic world as well. So I actually wanted to like pick their brain, and I had invited one of them, one of my friends, to like go meet up at a little place in Austin and talk so I could like pick his brain and figure out how he's making this amazing psychedelic music. And then he actually joined one of my other favorite bands right after that. So I decided that I would turn it into an interview as an excuse to pick their brains,
Mm-hmm.
because I was just interested, right? And so I interviewed this band called Vinyl Williams when they came into town in Austin. I live in Houston, but I went out to Austin, and the interview went super well, and we just had this like extremely mind expanding conversation. And it's so easy to ask me to do something like that, like because I'm pretty introverted of a person, but like when it comes to talking about the stuff that I like, like,
Yeah.
which for me is the intersection of music and psychedelics, and that whole world of psychedelics, but especially that part, it's like asking me to breathe. So I just did the interview and it went super well. And then I didn't really touch it for a while, but it was kind of later, after the pandemic happened. I was watching a bunch of YouTube, like a lot of us were. And then basically, there was something that clicked in my head that made me see YouTube videos as an art form. And I didn't really see, I mean, even though my brother's a cinematographer and I appreciate the video world as an art form, for some reason I didn't think of YouTube videos the same way.
Yeah.
So once I finally made that realization, I realized that like I could still be an artist, because like that's my goal ultimately in life, is to like live a artistic and creative life and not have to work three jobs, which is like what I'm doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
So like kind of on the in the hopes of like getting to that creative and independent place, and also like, getting to talk about psychedelic stuff, that's kind of been my goal for the last year.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of led to where I am, man. And then of course, yeah, like it started with the interviews, but then knew I had some pretty interesting stories, like trip reports that I wanted to tell. So I uploaded my first trip report, and it ended up being my most viewed video. So like I feel like my inkling that that was the first story I should tell, it turned out to be the right inkling, which was my heroic dose mushroom trip. So that ended up being, it didn't like go viral or anything like that, but it's definitely been the best video like on my whole channel. And like it's gotten to allow me to like meet other people and like kind of start to form this community. And then of course, the channel is called Find the Others. I think I was just listening to that one Terrence McKenna video, um, where he's quoting Tim Leary, which, that Find the Others is originally something Tim Leary said in the 60s.
Yeah.
And I think it's super relevant for a lot of people who are this interested in psychedelics, because it's like, even if you have other friends in your circle that like psychedelics or take psychedelics, it's only really a fraction of those people who are like so about it that they would start a channel and talk about it all day, you know?
Yeah,
So
right.
so
I
that
know.
was kind of the goal, man, just finding those other people and starting a little crew.
I think you're doing a good job, man. I've noticed that too, though. It's these substances don't affect everyone the same way. It's all, and I think Terrence McKenna actually said this. It's like psychedelics don't work on stupid people, and I'm not
Mm,
necessarily like obviously that's a little crude way to say it. Like
mm,
it's not stupid people, but there's some people that um these substances they like tap you and they give you inspiration, they lead you in a certain direction from the things that they show your consciousness, and there's some people that just they just like it for the experience, like they just get high, like no, I don't know how to explain it, man. you know
mm.
you know what I'm talking about, like the others. Like you said,
Casual users. Yeah.
casual users. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then when I do it, I'm like, how can you be casual about this? It's very
Yeah.
peculiar, and there's nothing wrong with it. I guess we all have our own meaning placed upon the substances, but it's interesting to me how there are others that see how important these substances are for us.
Hmm. Yeah, I think there's probably a bunch of reasons for that. One of them, I think the reason that I got so into it was not based on the first couple of times that I tripped, but it was my first like mystical experience that was like a life changing thing that, totally changed my perspective on uh, life and the universe and whether or not there's any kind of divinity and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So to me, that was like so profound and moving that it's like, how could you not at least be somewhat interested after that, you
Yeah.
know? So for me, that's what it was. It was that big trigger of like having a mystical experience and the other really interesting experiences that I've had like along the way. So to me, that's the difference, is like that, having a huge experience like that.
Mm-hmm. How would you describe what a mystical experience is to someone who has never had a mystical experience?
Yeah, that's a really hard thing because it's like famously one of the hardest things ever to describe, like
Yeah.
people call it unenglishable. And
Mm-hmm.
trying to describe it is like trying to F the ineffable. And
Yeah.
so like but it's a great challenge. So to actually answer your question, I would say it's kind of like the dissolving of the boundary, but like normally you feel like you are a unit and there's this outside world,
Yeah.
and that mystical experience is just you dissolving into that bigger picture. But it's hard to explain unless you experience it, that your awareness actually spreads to the size of the cosmos, or
Yeah.
like something like that, and
Yeah.
there's no preparing yourself for like experiencing anything like that. So that's what it was to me, is like merging into the infinite and the grand, the immensity of like space. And like I also felt like I was part of this extremely huge timeline, like I felt evolution going back millions and millions of years, and like realizing that you're connected to nature and like all of this happening at once. And then for me, another big part of the mystical experience while this was all happening, these things I'm describing, was the experience of like a kundalini awakening. And
Mm-hmm.
I had never experienced anything like that, up until that point. So just the fact that this would happen to me, and I wasn't like hoping, it wasn't like a placebo thing where I was like, I want to have a kundalini and like have a mystical experience. Like, no, it just happened. And I was just this clueless kid, basically.
Yeah.
So, and then when you read about other people's experiences, it seems like there's a lot of unique things that happen in individual mystical experiences, but there are a lot of common threads and stuff. So, to me, that kind of verifies that there's something true to this. And yeah, we could keep going deeper and deeper into that. But to me, that's kind of what mystical experience means.
Mm-hmm. That was a really good description, man. Uh, yeah. It goes like you said. It's you can't really describe it, but if you know, you know. Like I can kind of I get your gist.
Mm-hmm.
I get other
Mm-hmm.
people's gist that also explain it, but yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
truly doesn't. There's no way that words can grasp your awareness melting into the infinite. That
Right.
doesn't even make sense. That doesn't even.
Right.
There's no computation that can really fathom that. But it happens. Like there is a direct experience that comes from these molecules that allows our awareness to change. Like literally, your viewpoint and what you think you really are is different. Like it makes you feel not a human being almost, but you're still a human being. It's hard to explain, man. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard to explain.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally it though. Yeah, it's like just completely just getting rid of your ordinary sense of self, like
Yeah.
which is a very limited sense of self. And even just like the idea of like perceiving more than you normally perceive. Like let's like put all this identity and consciousness side of it, uh put that aside for a second and just think about the fact that like when you're on psychedelics you can see things that you normally wouldn't see, and it's like this opening of your physical senses. Like you
Yep.
can you become more attuned to like just the sensations of being a nervous system, and
Yeah.
that's a huge part of it too.
Yeah. That's heavy. Actually, Tim Leary said that. Like that's how you get in touch. He said LSD was some way to get get in touch with your nervous system. Like you go into
Mm-hmm.
your DNA, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that's a good way to put it. You go into your code. Like you can almost like feel your entire. Sorry, excuse me. You can almost feel your entire being like as the process. Like you're more than
Mm-hmm.
just this like narrative that you put in your head. Like I'm Gary, I'm doing this today, I'm hungry. It's like you realize this you're part in this entire process, and it's just the process is infinite. Like it doesn't end. There's just one sec. Okay, I think we're good now. it it doesn't end, dude. It's just like this layers upon layers of just interconnectivity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you feel yourself in that interconnectivity. And from that, I bring it back because you always come back. That's the crazy thing is you always come
Mm-hmm.
down. No matter how far out you go, you always come. Oh, I'm gonna get a drink, dude.
Yeah,
Something's
take your
going on
time, man.
here.
I'll take a sip too.
Stay hydrated.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks, for anyone listening. There we go. All right, much better. So as I was saying, you you come to a point of like infinite interconnectivity, and you see the process in the minuscule, the macro, the micro, and you see how all of this interconnectivity, no matter the size or locality, is interrelated. And that is like, yeah, you can't really fathom that. You can't really visualize that in a sober, quote unquote sober, I guess, state of mind. And when you come back from that to the sober state of mind, it changes you. Like it changed me at least. It made me like a better person, realize that, we're all, since everything is connected, that means I'm connected with you and we're all connected with each other in one way or the other. And that makes me change my actions. It makes I think it made me a better person overall, or it currently is, like, work in progress. But
Right.
how did it change you? How do you think the psychedelic experience has changed you and maybe the way that you make art?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, and I completely agree with what you said, like that being able to kind of see yourself in the context of the macro and the micro and all the interconnectedness does change you. And that's why I think it happens a lot where people, when we experience something like that, we feel how powerful that is. That's why we have the first inclination to be like, this is why everyone needs to take it, because like
Yeah,
you think that's going to happen to everybody, but
yeah,
it turns out that it's the non-specific amplifier. So it was just taking what was latent inside of us and amplifying that. But it's crucial for our lives, like for me and for you. I think it's safe to say that it was crucial, like, and it probably wouldn't have happened the same way without psychedelics. So like for me, it being able to see myself connected to the larger scale of things really kind of kicked off my kind of compassion for the environment. I didn't necessarily like litter and not care about the environment before. I just didn't think about it much, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then being able to see that you're part of that, it makes you realize like how messed up it is and like how we should be changing our behavior.
Yep.
And like as far as creativity goes, that was actually a huge part of my big like breakthrough mystical experience I had on LSD, was that when I felt this like Kundalini energy rising up my spine, I felt it kind of culminating in my heart. And then I felt how that was like love energy, right?
Yep.
And it felt like it was cultivating so much in here that it had nowhere else to go. And so I felt it like out of necessity, like, like steam that was bubbling up. It just had to go out the smokestack. And then that was the throat chakra, which is, is
Ooh.
like associated with creativity.
Yeah.
So when I was having this experience, I just felt like whatever this feeling that I had inside, my heart was full of this like bliss and euphoria and love, like whatever that was, like it was my mission now to express that and to bring it into the collectivity, and for me that's through music. And now, years later, now I realize that that's also through making videos and like even just talking, and like how you say it is like all creativity.
Yeah. Creating
So
out of the heart.
mhm,
Yeah, that's powerful. That wavelength is different when you create out of that chakra, and that's a really cool visualization that you put on it. Like came up and out of your mouth, and obviously that's a
yeah,
metaphor for your mouth, but like just the simple act of bringing your your speech into manifestation. Like what you
mhm,
say you're gonna do, and you create it.
mhm.
Cool.
And that, I mean, it wasn't even like talking about it as a metaphor, but in this experience it was literally like it felt like something was
Oh.
actually there and like
Mm-hmm.
gonna burst.
Yeah.
And like it's interesting too that we're talking about the heart too, because that, in the chakra system, that is where the terrestrial like lower chakras and lower modes of consciousness, where they intersect with the higher. And so it would make sense that that's where things are really, kicking off. And
Mm-hmm.
um it's also like if you think about the chakras in terms of like, I don't know, evolution, which Tim Leary actually talked about it like that. I have one of his books called Exopsychology, and he took the ideas of the chakras and he upgraded it and called it circuits. But it's basically the same idea where the most basic level of biology basically has a root chakra, a root circuit. And then as you work your way up to mammals, it's the next one. And then once you get to individuals like an egos, that's the third chakra. But then the next one would be the heart. So it makes sense that like we should be acting from the heart. That's kind of like our next step in evolution, if that's how things really work. I don't want
Yeah.
to talk about this chakra stuff like as if it's just totally solid. This is just kind of based on my intuition and just my thinking. And like I think that's where balance comes into uh, the fore. Like when you're dealing with such a complex system of energies and consciousness, like balancing it is what you want to aim for.
Yeah.
Like in my case, after I experienced the initial like Kundalini energy thing, it got to a point where I was actually able to feel like blockages and things like that. Like if I felt like I couldn't express myself, I would actually feel like something here, like kind of, and I felt like I
Yeah.
couldn't speak my mind just like instantly. It felt like I just couldn't say what I really felt in my heart, because there was a disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing with, like the third chakra. It was like I would feel powerless and unmotivated. And I could sometimes even feel like a little something, like a little tingle or something like right there. So
Mm-hmm.
I think there's definitely some kind of, yeah, circuits or chakras or something going on there.
Yeah, it's our electromagnetic energy that runs through us. It innately runs through us. Like we have an electrical current, and you can kind of edit it. You can kind of work with it.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you do tap into yourself, you realize that there are energetic centers in our body,
Mm-hmm.
and you can feel it. It's just that we all have it, but only some people can feel it. And you have to tap in. Like, you have to literally realize that we're more than just the five senses. It's way deeper than that. It's at an energetic level. Our being is so deep. Like, it's just so there's so many depths to the human experience that don't really go talked about. It's really our society is kind of like a shallow view of the human experience. Like, the popular ideal is like, the aperture on the camera is this big, but in
Mm-hmm.
reality it's this big, and you can tap in. Anybody has the ability. We can all tap in to open up the aperture ourselves, but it's only up to you. That's the thing. Like, nobody
Mm-hmm.
else is going to do it for you. Our society, the way we were brought up in our schools, they don't tell us how to go about, seeing the bigger picture. It's all up to us to
Right.
do this, and we have the tools. But then
Right.
psychedelics are a very they're very reliable to do that, in the right setting with the right mind. uh they're very reliable tools to get us expanding that awareness in it's I don't know, it's like magic, man. That's why they're called magic mushrooms. It's like
Mm.
it's really a miracle that we can do that, because to me, when I expand my consciousness and I see that I'm not just this little suffering being, like, oh, woe is me, I got these problems and bills and drama. When I can see the bigger picture, when I can relate to myself on a level of chakras and feeling my energy throughout my body and how it affects my emotional well-being and stuff like that, that gives me a sense of control, like more of a sense of control, I guess, in being able to be a human being. Even though we're not 100% in control and we're a faulty being, there's a way where you can not feel trapped, because we all feel trapped in one way or the other. Not feel like you're suffering as much, and not feel like that, you know um, you're in prison. I think Ramdas has a quote. He's like, when you realize awakening is like when you realize you're in prison. And that's kind of like the popular ideal of our society. It's a very small aperture where your mind is kind of imprisoned into this certain paradigm that um it's a false narrative for yourself and what it means to be a human. But psychedelics and, stuff like yoga, meditation, whatever it is, are a way to open that up and see and feel your true being. And
Mm.
the kicker of all that, the cherry on top, bro, when you realize what your true being is, you realize that you're immortal. And when you realize that you're immortal, that's all the power in the world. Nobody can stop you. When you realize that you're not just this suffering, we are and we're not, but we're not just this suffering human being. Like, our being is way greater than that. Then you have all the power in the world to um be, what am I trying to say, to be the most free and powerful human being that you can be, because you realize uh this doesn't really mean so much, I guess, per se. Like, our experience and our drama of life, it's the divine play of Leela. It's just like this show, when really what's going on behind the scenes, it's crazy, man. Like, it's just this
Mm.
unspeakable conundrum. It's just beautiful. It's just beauty. It's kind of peace. It's peaceful what's going on behind the scenes. But if you keep your aperture this small, you're not going to be able to see the full show. It doesn't mean you always have to live in the full behind the scenes all the time in the full show. It's cool to come back into the drama of life, but once you see behind the scenes, and you see that uh, this life is way greater than you've ever been told, that's when the fun starts.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you really start to live, you start to serve, and you start to, I don't know, feel a sense of freedom, because that's what we all want, man.
Yeah, totally. And that is so important right now because think about like what the alternative is, and that's like living in disconnect and living in suffering, which is kind of just like the default mode for humanity right now, especially
Yeah.
like in America and stuff. Like stuff is just so bleak and like has been for quite a long time. And for us to feel a connection to something that's larger, and to also have that larger perspective so that we can see that our problems, are like smaller in the grand scheme, can be a little reassuring. Yeah, but like you said, also, we don't have to detach from reality completely. And I feel like that's part of the journey that every psychonaut needs to make, especially because we don't have like a shaman or an experienced person. Like that function doesn't exist in our society. Like, I mean, there's shamans in indigenous cultures, but I'm talking about like just some kid from the suburbs, like like
Hmm.
we don't have the guide to be like, okay, you just experienced the infinite, now you need to like recollect and integrate this, and like uh and to be able to come back into the normal mode of consciousness. Because then there's a lot of like uh unfortunate tendencies that people have, like immediately following a huge experience, that they are stuck in the big picture mode, right? Like this happened to me. I was like so spaced out, dude. Like I really genuinely felt like for about 3 months I was experiencing some kind of like satori, like a
Wow, 3 months.
temporary,
Damn.
yeah, like a temporary enlightenment where like things literally looked like they were born anew. Like things literally looked different, and like I felt like I was floating and like lofty, and I was constantly in this like zoomed out perspective. But then stuff like that actually caused me to neglect basic things in my life, like my health or my friendships. And that eventually did come to bite me. But like I had to go through that. But the thing that I'm getting at here is that we don't have someone to guide us through all of that. So it's like part of the like hero's journey, the dark night of the soul. It's weird. It's like I had the best thing ever happen to me first, and then that led me to the dark place for me to like then finally reintegrate everything and like get stable in a mindset. Like I really felt like I was a total space cadet, like following my huge experiences, and it took me a really long time to like finally settle down. And I think there was a Carl Jung quote about this that like really aligned with kind of my experience, where he was like, integration, or maybe not integration, but becoming whole for Carl Jung. He said it was like a matter of realize he had to descend all the way from the top of the atmosphere, all the way down to the earth, to finally realize that he was a piece of clay, just like the earth. Like just to realize that his essence is he's just that speck. He's just that clay of the earth. And that's a very humbling, like rooted perspective too. And that's another, this is making me think of a bunch of things, but like this whole spiritual thing, it's also about the body. Like we come into contact with the spiritual through the body.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a big part of our suffering too in our part of the world, is that we're just like these floating heads that are like disconnected from the rest of our body. Like we might as well just be brains in a jar, like on Futurama.
Hmm.
And so like I just feel like all of that it's connected.
Yeah, for sure. That's so true. Like you have to connect with your body first in order to know that you're more than your body. It's ironic.
Hmm. Yeah, it gives you a stable ship to learn on. But
Mm.
if you also think of it this way, if you think of like your root as your connection to the earth, but then you realize that the earth is more than just the dirt and ground beneath you, but that earth is part of this like greater spirit, of Gaia. That it's like just like a circuit, or like a loop. It's like
Mm.
by connecting to the ground and the root of the earth that you're actually connecting to this larger spiritual body.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a powerful one. That's the basis behind grounding.
Mm-hmm.
Like going barefoot in the grass. There's something
Yep.
about it. There really is. You can feel it, man.
Yeah, that was part of my biggest like thing to integrate my spiritual experiences, is that I had to ground, because I felt like I had all this the higher interstellar stuff, I had that, like I was
Hmm.
able to contact that and like get these spacey modes of consciousness, but I felt like I was just so uprooted, that I didn't feel at home or didn't feel, just literally just feeling rooted. And then it takes physically putting your feet on the ground, and
Yeah.
among other things, like I think that friendships are also a really good way to root yourself. And so just learning a bunch of stuff like that has been like a huge part of everything. And like to meditate and to do yoga and to get into your body and get into your spirit, this is what we actually need. Like we're all in such a materialistic culture, a disconnected from nature and materialistic culture, that when we meditate and we like connect with whatever it is that we, you know, it's our spirit or a greater spirit, whatever you want to think about it, that is what we actually really need, that we're trying to compensate for with all this materialistic stuff. But like I noticed when I'm meditating and doing my kundalini breath work and doing that regularly, like I feel satisfied, like that I
Hmm.
have the thing that I truly wanted this whole time,
Hmm.
and that it's right there and it's in our body and in our spirit. And it's like, yeah, everything's just so backwards, but we got to just do our best to adjust our behavior.
Yeah, for sure, man. That was beautiful. It's been here the whole time. That's a great revelation. I've had that before. I'm like, oh, what am I looking for? We're all looking for ourselves, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not gonna find yourself if you get lost in TikTok and Facebook and the news. Like it's not. But that's how our society is run. Like constant stimulation, just
Yeah.
constant from the outside. But all you need, like 5-10 minutes a day, and then 5-10 minutes turns into 15-20, and that turns into more and more. It's a gradual thing. This whole spiritual journey is, I think, for me, it's a gradual thing. You don't just go head first and do Kundalini yoga and DMT tomorrow. It's kind of just
Mhm.
like, it's kind of just build upon what works for you and then get rid of what doesn't. And all you need, yeah, just a little bit, 5-10 minutes a day. That's really all you need, man. And yeah.
That's funny. I thought you were just, when you started to say just a little bit and you said five, I thought you were going to be saying like 5-MeO DMT, just a little bit of
Just a
5-MeO.
little bit of 5-MeO DMT on a Friday afternoon. That's it.
Yeah.
I've actually never done that before, so I can't speak on it.
Yeah.
Have you?
No, I haven't actually. No. And it's actually been a while since I've tripped, man. I took a little bit of mushrooms in like May, and
Mm-hmm.
then it was like a really light experience, which was fun. Like it worked out for what I needed at the time, but I'm probably going to be taking another journey really soon, man.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about these quote unquote drugs is that you don't have to do them, you know, every day. You do them.
Hmm.
You do them when you feel like you need it. You know,
Hmm.
when was the last time you said? Probably like a few months ago or a few years ago.
Like 8 months ago, maybe longer. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the way to go about it. When you get the message, hang up the phone. But sometimes the phone rings again, for sure.
Mm.
But like that's the way to go about it. It's like treat these things as a I don't know, how do you treat them? How would you say your relationship is with using them? I don't even like saying using, but like having them as an aid.
Yeah, almost like the same way you would treat a doctor, like you go for a
Hmm.
checkup,
Yeah.
like a
Hmm.
retuning. That's kind of how I've been using psychedelics since I had that big experience. And then you know, immediately after the big experience, I probably did take them a little too often because, I'm sure this happens to a lot of people. You get excited and you want to like feel that again. So I
Hmm.
was like taking them a little more often. I never went too crazy. But like once I got over that and became a little more discerning about it, it basically turned into like a thing I did when I felt like I was not feeling the magic so much of life anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're working every day and you're like, ah, this sucks. Like I don't feel inspired, and like I just feel like I'm in that prison again.
Yep.
And so it's usually when I feel that the radar goes off in my head that it's like time to go back, and like you do it with a lot of respect and like openness, like you would with a teacher or a doctor or somebody that knows more than you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's basically my approach. So yeah, I'm feeling that right now, bro. Like it's time to take another journey.
You getting the itch?
Yeah, definitely.
It's fun. Isn't that funny how there's this like one part of our brain that is sort of unconsciously telling us to do this experience, which is, usually it can be a very intense experience and
Mm-hmm.
very just a lot of energy comes in,
Mm-hmm.
And there's one part of our brain that tells our sober brain like, "Hey man, you got to change this. You got to go
Mm-hmm.
into that." It's very peculiar. It's like why can't the brain just do that itself? Like why do I need to take this? It knows
Yeah.
somehow the brain unconsciously knows that it needs this molecule in order to
Right.
make the changes that it needs, but it knows somehow unconsciously, like we know that we need the change, like deep down.
Yeah. I think
Interesting.
that, yeah, it is interesting. I think that comes from like the fact that our brain like settles into grooves.
Yeah.
So it's
Mm-hmm.
like you've been doing this everyday activity. And so now you have this like well defined set of grooves in your brain. And it's time to shake the snow globe. It's time to like mix things up. And to me, that's what it is. It's like once your brain has like settled into this like more rigid state,
Mm-hmm.
it's like what is on the other side of a psychedelic experience, which is like that plastic state of mind, where your brain is malleable and like you are synthesizing new information. And like, for me as a musician, I can feel less creative or something like that, Um, so all of these are kind of like internal guides to tell us like when it's time to take another experience. But as a general rule of thumb, I mean, for the past few years, I've been doing it like 2 or 3 times a year.
Mm-hmm.
So like, but that's because I really want to make sure I like put a lot of intention and importance like before the trip, and that I also take away a lot of integration and like lessons from after the trip, because like if
Mm-hmm.
you sandwich them too close together, chances are you're just not going to do that. Like even if you wanted to and your intention was right, you just might not be able to, because you're having loads and loads of information. Like the downloads are, like you said, are so huge on psychedelics that you just wouldn't get the chance to integrate those. So, and
Yeah.
I notice I have my best trips when I have like properly integrated the stuff from the last time. Like my journey with psilocybin mushrooms has been really interesting, where it's like taking me down this very specific type of rabbit hole that has to do with like a lot of ideas that Terence McKenna talked about, like alchemy and Gnosticism, and the whole mushroom speaking and the logos and these kind of ideas. Like that has been a lot of my experience on the mushroom too. But I have to like keep reading about the stuff that comes up in my trips for it to like keep going on the next episode, like I have to like integrate what I did last time. But I'm motivated to do that because it's been really rewarding. Like when I read about alchemy after I have a trip about it, then the next one, sure enough, is like very enriching. And like I even a couple years ago, yeah, during 2020, I had a mushroom trip, and it was like at a time where I was reading a bunch about alchemy and like integrating stuff from my past experiences. And I was like doing Kundalini meditation almost every day. And I felt the mushroom say to me, like, good job. Like, you're doing good work. And I just heard that in my head, like, you're doing good work, like, keep going. And it just felt like this ultimate seal of approval. Right. And so, like, so that's been my kind of approach to this for the last few years, at least.
Yeah. Almost like a guide, right? It's
Yeah,
interesting.
totally, totally. But what's interesting is that it's already in you. It's just
Yeah.
like the chemical key.
It's the chemical key to open up the doors of perception, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So how does it affect your art and creativity?
That's a great question, man. Well, in the biggest picture sense, it solidified the fact that this is what I want to do.
Mm.
Um, like when I told you about that experience where I felt like I had to express this love and this bliss that I felt, it it wasn't just like I wanted to do it a little bit. It was like, this is why I'm freaking here on this earth. Like I am certain about it,
Yeah.
and I feel like it's rare that people have an experience that gives them a sense of purpose and like, like a role as a being on this earth. Like that's a pretty huge thing to discover. And so like that was probably the biggest thing initially. And then other than that, it's another one of those things where it's like almost as hard as describing the psychedelic experience and the mystical experience is like, how do you put into words like what it's doing? It's the same thing with like, how does it affect your music? I can think of a few things though. For one, it's the vibe. You think of
Mm.
like a cosmic vibe that you feel on LSD. You want to convey that vibe and even the emotion. In a more recent LSD trip, I was listening to a song by a Brazilian artist, and then the song sounded like the theme song of like human curiosity and our wonder about the universe and like the fact that we're these cosmic apes, and like it felt like the music was like representing that, and like that's the kind of thing I want to infuse in my music too. And so like there's that aspect of it, the vibe and the energy and the emotions that are associated with the psychedelic space to be able to like recreate that. Another thing is also dissolving boundaries. For me, it's dissolving boundaries between music genres and like ideas. Like you might have these two separate ideas, like, oh, hip hop and math rock. They might be totally separate in your head, but then when you're with psychedelics, it could like just dissolve the boundaries between all of that. So now it's just this giant like soup, this like gumbo in your head. And to me, that's psychedelics have been really useful in creativity to like synthesize information and like take things that are like this far apart normally and like finally connect the dots with those. And I feel
Mm.
like psychedelics allow you to make a bigger jump of like what dots you're connecting. Like you can go even further different ideas and bring them together. And that really ties in with like Terence McKenna's idea of novelty, that the universe is a novelty creating machine or an engine. And novelty, at the most basic definition, being like putting two things together that have never been put together before. And so, like, yeah, to me, that's this whole psychedelics and creativity. It's like all tied into this idea of like the universe being a novelty generator. And then you get to be co creator of that novelty in the universe. Like, as an artist, that's what we are. We like are co creators with the universe. So that's probably how, in a nutshell, I could probably go more into that, but that would be probably how it affects creativity in my
Mm.
eyes.
Mm. That was good, man. That was a good explanation. I like how you said like 2 points find they find a commonality. And when you look at like the brain in terms of neurogenesis, you're almost like literally doing it at that level with the,
Mm-hmm.
it's just at a basic level. You got two neurons and they can't connect, but for some reason when you take psilocybin or some other psychedelic, it's you can make that they make that connection. And that's
Mm.
what inspiration is, right? It's like that is novelty in our brain. Like
Uh-huh.
literally, the neurons can't connect, and then boom, oh,
Right.
an idea happens. So it's
Right.
like, yeah, there's a metaphorical connection that you just presented, but there's also like a physical neural connection in our brain when
Yeah.
it comes to inspiration and creativity with these things.
Dude, you're totally right. And it's crazy because it's like even when we're talking about that, I think our neurons are probably doing that right now. Like they're probably connecting and
Oh
like
man.
I think yeah, you totally nailed it. Like that's just such a cool idea, and like it would make sense that we don't have that mode of our brain on all the time because yeah, I we probably wouldn't make it across the street if we were living in New York or something, or
Hmm.
anywhere really. The drivers are crazy down here too in Texas.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just feel like it makes sense that we have a reduced aperture, like you're saying, to survive, but like we need to have both perspectives and be able to think of them as different modes. And that's been really helpful for me to think of it this way, like different modes. It's not like um the everyday reality, like that's just, it's just bull, like the real true reality is this shining void that's here at all times and we're all one. It's like, to me, it's like a matter of context. It's like when I'm talking to you right here right now, it's more helpful for me to like think of it more in smaller scale, like just to think of it as two humans interacting rather than like the whole universe happening at once and we're just this like cosmic expression. Like that is true, but to me it's like that's another mode of consciousness. And
Yeah.
like to think of it as modes has been really helpful for me because I'm trying to like work through these contradictions. Like, is it this or is it that? When it's like it's this during this time and it's that during that time. So
Hmm.
Eric Davis has been really helpful to my like modern or my current way of thinking. And have you ever heard of him?
No, what does he do?
Well, he's an author, and he also does like lectures, and like yeah, he does a lot of writing. But he's amazing. He's actually the guy who did the last Terrence McKenna interview before he died.
Damn. Okay.
Yeah, and he does these meditations called psychedelic, or no, he changed the name. So now it's called Dharmanaut Circle,
Hmm.
and it's specifically a meditation group geared towards psychonauts and like psychedelic explorers. So and he gives like a talk and does a meditation, but his like perspective has been really helpful for me, and I consider him like a mentor even though he's not directly mentoring me. I consider him a mentor because he's got this like radically open mind where he's open to whatever these psychedelic experiences might bring, and like these things with energy and the subtle body, and like even the really really far out stuff with like the machine elves. And he's like open to that, but he's also like skeptical enough to like not get carried away with that stuff. And I feel like that's such a hard like balance to strike, but I feel
Hmm.
like he does it well. And his heyday was like in the 90s, so he's been around the block a little bit. So to hear him like speak about it with a little wisdom gained has been really helpful in like me developing my own kind of mindset towards all this stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, I'll have to check him out.
Definitely, yeah, I'll send you some stuff, man.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, it's all about the balance. It's all about the balance.
Yeah, yeah, it's the way he describes it too is like a tightrope balance. It's not an easy balance. It's like you're just towing the line between something so extreme.
Mm, yeah, and you could fall off very easily.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's a very unfortunate and like real side effect, or like just phenomenon that happens in the psychedelic community. They call it acid casualties, right? It's like
Hmm.
people who they were convinced that they were Jesus, and then they were never the same after that. Something happened, like something wrong happened in their brain, which some people would say like that's just people who are gonna be schizophrenic anyway, and then the psychedelics kind of just accelerated that process. But like
Yeah.
that, I still think that there's a good chance for like even someone who's not about to be schizophrenic, for them to have like such a traumatic or like weird episode on psychedelics that they might like slip off into some other side or fall off the tightrope, or just like believe their own hype or something, like they really believe that they're Jesus Christ or something,
Yeah.
even
Hmm.
more harmless stuff like that. So,
Yeah. I know what you mean, man. It's just yeah, that's a way to. They can be a way to inflate somebody's ego, I guess, if not integrated well.
mhm. Yeah, that's the weird contradiction to all this, right? It's like an ego death can inflate the ego. It's like a weird it's weird, right? It's like,
Yeah, I
because
wonder why.
I feel like that happened to me too. It's just because people want to feel like they know something that other people don't. It's kind of like the same thing with conspiracies. Like people want to be the ones to be like, I know the truth, but you guys, y'all don't know what's really going on, under the pizza shop. uh,
Yeah.
like so I feel like that is partially due, like that's kind of why, like when you have these psychedelic revelations, you want to feel like, oh, I know something now that, other people don't know, which may be true, but you got to like remember like that we're on a equal playing field, or that we are all like valid, I guess. So it's like it's never your right to say to someone like you don't see the truth or something like that, because just think about how would you talk to yourself 10 years ago. Like if you met someone that was you from 10 years ago that had all the same perspectives of old you, like would you tell them like, oh, you're hopeless, like you're
Hmm.
never gonna see the light? And it's like, no, like everyone's on their journey, and I feel like there's got to be a more like open and respectful way to like treat everyone that way.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't tell somebody the truth. You just have to directly realize it yourself, and that's
Mm-hmm.
it. And then from there, you just be the best version of yourself, and maybe it'll rub off on somebody else, and they'll be like, "Wait a second, I like what that guy's doing. I'm
Yeah.
gonna take what, his energy and bring it into my life." That's the best
Yeah.
we can do. Yeah.
I agree, man. I think that's what's cool about Terrence McKenna, is that he was always stressing like, hey, don't listen to me. I mean, even though he's an amazing speaker and you want to listen to him, like, but he never came off like, I know what's true and you got to listen to me. It was more like, you should go find this for yourself, like go investigate yourself and tell me, like, you know, you can like verify these things, these spiritual realities yourself. And that's like the most powerful thing about this, is that it's in an ideal world, a psychedelic community would be like uh, a group of people who were all self-empowered and self-selected to like be the ones who go and journey into these other spaces, and like they everyone individually contacts whatever they think God or spirit or divinity is. And so you don't have to have someone else telling you what that is. Like you made the direct contact yourself. And like, so to me, that's one of the more powerful like things that Terrence McKenna brought to the table. And like, I agree with that perspective. Like, go find things for yourself, like,
Mm-hmm.
even though someone's telling you go find it for yourself, it's a different kind of advice than like, let me tell you how things are.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Exactly. I guess if you're gonna tell somebody how to go about this, it's like just go about it. Go into yourself. Go
right,
about it on your own accord. That's the only thing you can do.
right,
Uh,
it's
I
like
mean, I
permission to do that.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I encourage everybody to do that. That's listening to this thing, man. Go within yourself. I think obviously if anybody's listening to this, they're probably on that same wavelength. They know what we're talking about, especially if
Mm,
they listen to this far along.
mm,
So they know the deal. But it's true, man. Once you know that that's how it is, like that's how once you go within yourself, man, you get like this moral barometer. I don't know, you get like a sense of direction that
mm,
nobody else can sway you from.
mm,
No external deity or entity um can sway you away from the truth. I know it sounds cliche and corny, but it's true, man. Like nobody can really take you off the rocker. You know what I'm saying? Like you're good. Like there's a certain like once you tap into your being at the deeper levels, there's a certain kind of like fortitude that's built,
mm,
and that to me, that's grace. That's amazing that we can have that. Uh, and I credit a lot of it to psilocybin. My experiences with
mm,
psilocybin are what woke me up at least to the ability to have that fortitude and build a lifestyle where I kind of resonate at that sense of knowing the truth, quote unquote, a little more regularly, I guess you could say, in my life,
mm.
and ultimately that has made me a little bit more at peace and a little bit happier.
Yeah,
That's what we all
that's
want.
that's like priceless, man. And I
Yeah.
feel like what you're saying, it ties directly to what we were just talking about. Like the reason that you have that fortitude is because it's something that you contacted directly yourself. So like
Yep.
that's why you know and you feel that truth like with so much conviction, is because not because someone told you that's what was true, is because you lived it, you experienced it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's like the most, one of the more amazing things about psychedelics is like the way it makes you not just know something, but like feel it in every freaking fiber of your being.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's a different kind of knowing. It's a more visceral um
It's kind of
feeling.
faith.
Mm,
Like it kind of showed me what faith meant. Like not faith. Like when I the popular idea of faith for me used to be faith in, the guy in the collared shirt's words and faith of, of dogma. But then when
mm,
you truly get faith in your internal workings, your internal higher self, whatever you
right,
want to call it, man,
right.
that is like unpenetrable faith. Like that's all you need, essentially.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about? Like, do you have that? Do
Totally.
you, do you feel that fortitude?
Yeah, totally. It feels like a lot like trusting the process. You know how
Mm-hmm.
people say that, but it's like the process of your own inner unfoldment.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
like I think we're all on a process of what Carl Jung would call individuation, basically like becoming our own unique selves and becoming like a whole and complete version of ourselves.
Yeah.
And that our deep unconscious is where a lot of this stuff happens. But that's the material that we work with in the psychedelic world, is like it brings these unconscious things to the conscious. And that's why it takes a kind of faith, because it's not our conscious decisions. Like it's more of a deep intuition and our deep unconscious, our dreaming mind, that is really calling the shots on all of this spiritual stuff. So we do have to have faith in that, because it's something that this Tyler or this Gary is not in control of. So you kind of do have to have faith to like allow that to take care of itself. But you can be the rudder, you can steer the ship. Maybe you can't power it, but you can like
Mm.
make sure it's like you're the one who like adjusts. I think of it too, like when you're meditating, like you're always trying to kind of adjust to like find that like perfect position to sit in and like finally be comfortable and like adjust your breathing. Or if your thoughts come back up again, you want to adjust that. And so like I think that's the role that the conscious mind, or you could even say the ego, is the adjuster. Like we
Mm.
can make the little tweaks, but the real work is happening at that much deeper level of the unconscious. So that's why we kind of have to have faith in that for sure.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Yep. Surrender to the process. But yeah, also at the same time we surrender, but then that gives us a sense of control. It's weird.
Mm-hmm.
You surrender to like going down the river of life. Like we're all flowing down the river, but like you said, yeah, we have a rudder to direct where we are in the stream.
Yeah, yeah, totally. The opposite is true too, where like I just think of like creative metaphors, but like in music and stuff, you could say that discipline is like what allows you the freedom, because it's like you study how to play music and like some music theory stuff and chords and things like, or just techniques or whatever. But it's that discipline that later down the line, when you like after you smoked a blunt or whatever and you're like improvising, then all of that stuff comes and you're like in this free flowing state. And it
Mm.
was that like discipline before that allowed you that to have that like soaring freedom. So it works the opposite in the, or it works the same way in the opposite way too. So
Mm.
it's weird, right? How like just contradictory that seems, but it works.
Mm-hmm. That's how our reality is, just a giant paradox of polarities
Mm,
at the basis
yeah,
of it. That's how you
yeah,
truly understand like how this universe works. It's like you have to understand polar opposites and then realize that you need to have polar opposites. Like
yeah,
that's yin and yang. Like you can't just have one aspect of yourself and another aspect.
right,
There has to be those competing elements, and those competing
right.
elements are what makes up the flow of life.
Totally. I've been into that idea for a really long time, man, even before psychedelics. And like what I've kind of like focused on recently is like what's in between the polarities is a spectrum. And like
Mm,
a lot of times things fall somewhere on the spectrum between two extremes. And but yeah, like in songwriting, I feel like I was always really intrigued by music that didn't sound like it was just straight up happy or sound like it was straight up sad. It was like this mix of sad happy, you know, like when the, let's say the music is the instrumental, what the band is doing is really uplifting, but then the lyrics are like, you got a black eye and like your dog died, and or, you know, this is just a little cartoonish example, but like it's the juxtaposition of those two opposites that creates something more like what real life is, you know.
yeah.
It's like real life is a mix of those polarities. And um even the idea of like masculine and feminine energy, you know, being a polarity, like that's a big thing in like kundalini, right?
Hmm.
um and so, and positive and negative um currents and all that stuff. So yeah, it's definitely uh a huge part of our reality that once you start to notice that, then things start to make a little bit more sense.
Yeah, I know what you mean. You have to realize the opposites first to realize what's in between the opposites.
mm, hmm.
That's pretty powerful, bro. Damn. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
it makes things really complicated, but that's the world. The world is messy and complicated, and like not everyone has the answers, but like we can just do our best to like pay attention and try to understand.
Exactly, dude. Pay attention. That's it. Pay attention to yourself, not the news, not TikTok,
Mm,
not Facebook,
mm,
not in somebody else's drama. Man, pay attention to what's inside. And then from there, that's like I said before, that's when the fun starts.
mm-hmm.
Oh man. Yeah, we
Agree.
can probably wrap this thing up at that point, honestly. This
All
is a good
right.
convo. Do you have any
Yeah, man.
last words? Like anything you want to get off your chest?
Yeah, not really, but I guess yeah, like everyone stay safe and keep spreading good vibes, but you know, don't don't ignore the shadow while you're spreading good vibes, you
Yeah,
know, while you're spreading the light. Be realistic about the dark side of things too, but you know, you don't have to bring yourself down about it. It's all part of this polarity, right, of good and bad.
exactly.
And yeah, like if you want to check out my channel, it's called Find the Others, and my name, Tyler Saucier. And I'm on YouTube and Instagram and stuff like that. And yeah, I'll have to have you on my channel sometime, Gary, and we can talk about your trips, because we didn't even get into that, but I'd love to like hear some of your stories, bro.
100%, 100%.
Cool.
Cool, man. Yeah, let's connect after this and stay in touch. And thank you for anybody that listened. Thank you for coming on, Tyler. It's a
Yep.
great convo. And other than that, peace out.
Cool. Peace.